In this video, we'll be adding some constraints to our train engine to tell it to go around the curved track. So what we need to do first in order to do this is open up your train engine, and we need to apply a work plane to our wheels so that we have something to apply a constraint to the wheel to tell it to move the arm and rotate the wheels on both sides. So the best way to do this is to simply just open up your wheel file. So I'm just going to click over here on the left in our model window, and then right click and then just click open. And then that's going to open up our wheel file. And again, what we want is a work plane that's going to be cutting this in half. So I'm going to go up to the origin window in or the origin folder in our model window. And then I'm just going to highlight over these work planes that are already here for us. And the one that we want, or the one that I want, is the XY plane. Yours might be slightly different, but choose the one that is kind of cutting the wheel in half, like what you see right here. So if this is a little bit different, yours might be the YZ or the XZ, depending on which plane you drew the wheel from. So go ahead, and once you get that, right click on it and then just check visibility. Okay, after you get that, you want to save this. So then go down to File and then Save. And then you can go ahead and close out of the wheel. What you will notice is when you go back to your train engine assembly, you'll notice those work planes on all 4 of your wheels. So just make sure that you have those work planes on all 4. Okay, what we are going to be doing next is we're going to be applying a constraint between the back wheel here with that work plane and then the back of the train body. Okay, so I'm going to go up to the constraint menu, and then we're going to click angle. And then, like I said, we're going to click the work plane. So select the work plane, and then you want to select the back of the train, and then make sure that you have directed angle selected. Okay. And then you're going to click apply, and then we can close out of that window. And one thing that you'll notice is you are not able to rotate by just dragging the linkage arm anymore. In order to get it to rotate now, you need to drive that constraint. And so what we can do is this wheel that we applied the constraint to is wheel 3. So if you just click on that, that'll highlight it over here, and then we're going to click the arrow to expand it, and you'll notice this is our angle constraint right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to right click, and then we're going to go to drive, and then by default it is at 0 degrees, and then notice the end is only 10 degrees. So if we click play now, it's only going to go forward 10 degrees. To tell it to go forward a little bit more, you can change the 10. I'm going to make mine 3,600. So then when I'm going to go back to the beginning, and then when you click play now, it'll rotate for a longer time. Please make sure that it is rotating this direction. So the wheels should be rotating toward the front. They should not be rotating backwards. So make sure that they're rotating forwards. Okay. All right, and then click OK. And what we want to do is do the same thing for the other sides. We're going to go back here, and I'm just going to rotate it so we can see it a little bit better, and then click constrain, just like we did before, angle. And then I'm going to click the back of the train first, and then I'm going to click the work plane this time. I found that that helps getting the direction correctly, at least for how mine is set up. So if you, and then click apply. And again, just like we did but last time, this wheel that we just applied this constraint to, mine is wheel 1. So just expand that from your model window, go down into your angle, and then drive it. And then I'll just leave mine at 10 for now. I just want to check to make sure that it goes forward. Notice that mine did go forward there. So I'll change this to 3,600 degrees. And again, just make sure that those wheels rotate forward. If they don't rotate forward, try deleting that angle constraint and then reapplying it. And then what you want to try to do is maybe click on the back of the train first and then the work plane, or click on the work plane and then the back. Just flip what order that you're clicking on those until you get the direction correct. Okay. But once you've got that, you've got your angle constraints on both sides now. What we're going to do now is go into the parameters window. So if you click on that, this will basically have every single dimension for our train, and we're only going to be concerned with the 2 angle constraints that we just applied. So we're going to go down here to the two angles right here. This angle 1 is the angle constraint for the left side of the train that we added, and then the angle 2 is for the right side. What we want to do is change these numbers here, or change where mine says D42. Yours might say a different number. Don't be concerned with what that says, but we're just going to change this to say crank 1. All right, and then the bottom one here, we're going to change this to say crank 2. Okay, so we basically labeled it crank 1, crank 2. And what we want to do is get it so that we can have these rotate at the same time. So in order to do that, what we can do is tell crank 2 here, instead of being set to 0 degrees under the equation column, we can just put crank 1 in here, so that when we drive crank 1, the degree goes for crank 1 is also given to crank 2, so it tells the other side to rotate for the same amount. So then we can just click done with that. And then what we can do is I am just going to rotate crank 1, which for me that was wheel 3. So I'm going to collapse wheel 1 because I'm not going to mess with that anymore. So then right click on this, select drive as we did before. And then I'm going to just reset it back to 0. And then now if you click play, you will notice that both sides rotate at the same time and for the same amount, which is what we want. So this is kind of step 1 of getting your train to move. It's just getting these crank arms to move at the same time. So make sure you have that. Okay, so I'm going to stop that and then set it back to the beginning. One thing we can do now is we can actually get rid of these work planes. So like we did before, if you just right click on any of your wheels, click open, and then this work plane that we made, which was in the origin folder, you can just right click on that and then uncheck visibility, and then just make sure you save that and then close out of it, and your engine should automatically update to hide that. And you don't need those work planes to actually drive these. So you'll notice you're still able to drive these without those work planes. All right. What we're going to do now is we're going to add in our curved track, similar to how we did this before. So I'm going to click place, and then I'm just going to click the curved track individual piece. Make sure you have this piece made. If you don't, you can check my previous video on how to create this piece. And then we're going to use the circular pattern to fill out the rest of the circle for the track. All right, for component, we're going to select our circular component. And then we're going to choose the circular pattern. And then for the axis direction under circular, I'm going to choose the inside of the circular track piece. And you'll notice we start to get some of them arranged in a circle. We want to change a few things to get it to fill out completely though. So we're going to change this to 8. And then in the degrees, we're going to change this to 45 degrees. And you'll notice that you get a continuous circular track there. Okay, and then click OK. All right, so one thing you'll notice is our track moves, and then my train is grounded. So before we add anything else, let's unground our train. So I'm going to right click on the train body and then unselect grounded so that the train now moves. And we want the track to be grounded because it's not the track that's going to be moving with the train. It's going to be the train moving around the track. So in order to ground the track, you have to select the arrow next to component pattern. And then I'm just going to select the first element. So then click the element, the arrow next to element 1, and then right click that curve track and then ground that piece. So since that piece is grounded, that's going to ground all of them because they are all connected. So that will ground the entire circular track. All right, what we're going to do next is in the middle here, we're going to create a cube called a pivot cube that will basically be used to get the train to move around in a circle, and we're going to be adding some constraints and stuff to that cube. So I'm going to just click this create button up here in the top left, and then this is going to be called a pivot cube, and click OK. And then just place it approximately in the center of the circular track. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then click start or 2D sketch. And then I'm going to choose the XY plane. And then what this is going to be is a 3/4 by 3/4 inch square. And then we'll extrude that also 3/4 of an inch. So I'm just going to say 0.75 for our rectangle on both sides here. And then we'll click finish, and then we'll extrude that. And we're going to extrude that 0.75 and click OK. All right, and what you should have is a 3/4 inch cube. And we just need to add one more thing here. We're going to add a hole on the top so that we have a circle to dimension it. So then we'll just create a sketch on the top of the cube. And then to make sure that the hole is in the center of this, I'm going to click on Project Geometry, and I'm just going to get the top line and the left side line of our cube. So just click Project Geometry and click the top and the left side. And then I'm going to use the point tool, and then just make sure that you are drawing this point exactly in the center of that cube, like that. And then click Finish. And then we're going to click on that point, and then we'll go to the hole tool to just make a hole. And the size of this doesn't really matter. 0.25 is fine. And then we're just click OK. All right, so we have our pivot cube made. To get out of the edit menu, if you just right click somewhere in the empty space and then click Finish Edit, that will take you back into your assembly. What we want to do now is tell our cube to be exactly in the center of this so that we can't move it like we are able to right now. So we're going to go to Constraint and then Insert. And then I'm going to click the hole that we made in our pivot cube first. All right, and then we're going to click the circular track. So I'm going to click on the top part of the circular track. All right, and that will insert the cube in the track. One thing you might notice is if you rotate it, see how the cube is above the track, so we can align it. So I'm going to choose the align option so that it brings it down so it's lined up with the track. And click apply. All right, so what you should have now is that cube should be in the center. You should not be able to move it, but it should still be able to rotate, which is what we want. All right, so we are now ready to start applying some constraints to our train engine so that it rests on the track and rotates around it. Okay, one of the first constraints that we're going to add is between the top of the track and the bottom of the train. So let's go ahead and rotate our train around. So I'm going to use the free rotate tool just to rotate the train bottom so I can see the bottom here. All right, so we're going to go to Constraint, and then we'll select Mate, and then we'll just click on the bottom of the train body, and then we'll click on the top of the track, and that will add a constraint or mate between those two. One thing that you'll notice is that the train wheels do go down a little bit far. We do want the wheels to go into the track a little bit because we want them to go into the grooves, but we do want to apply an offset here so that it raises this up a little bit. So the offset here, we're going to put 0.4375, and you'll notice that that raises the train up. And you'll notice that there is a little bit of a gap now between the bottom of the train and the track. So that is what we're telling it right here with that offset. So then just click apply, and then we'll close out of that. So you'll notice the train is now resting above the track, but we're still able to move it side to side. So we're going to add another constraint. So go back into your constraint menu. And we're going to also add a mate between the side of the train engine. So click the side of the engine, and then click a side of your pivot cube. And now obviously this is not where we want the train to be. We want the train to move away from there, but we do want this side of the pivot cube and that side of the train to always be facing toward each other with this constraint. So we're just going to apply an offset, and we're just going to change this to about 12 inches, which should place it approximately where it needs to be, apart from the pivot cube. This dimension is just a rough estimate, so you can go back in and change this later to fine tune this so that the wheels are lined up with the grooves. Okay, so go ahead, click apply. and then exit out of that, and then we'll just test this again. You will notice your train kind of moves around the track now, but we need to apply one more constraint to get it so that it is kind of locked in. And what we need to do is tell it we're going to apply a flush between the front of the train and this side of the pivot cube. Okay, so we'll go to constrain, and then this time we're going to choose flush, and then we'll click on the front of the train, and then this side here that is facing that is the same direction as the front of the train. Okay, and what you'll notice what that does is that lines them up so they are aligned. What we want to do is change that so that the cube, let me move this window, the cube is now halfway between the body, not at the front of the body, like where this plane is. So we're going to apply an offset of about 2.5 so that it opened. Actually, that went the wrong direction. You notice that moved the cube this way. We wanted to move the cube back. So let's put negative 2.5. So you'll notice now the cube is about in the middle right there, which is where we want it. So then let's click apply. And then like we've been doing, let's just go ahead and test it just by dragging it. And you'll notice that the train moves smoothly around the track now. You'll notice the wheels don't quite line up. Again, you guys can go ahead and change in the dimensions, change the 12 and that last dimension, that flush that we changed to get these wheels to line up with those grooves a little bit better. So what we want to do now is apply one more constraint. We're going to apply an angle constraint between the one of the sides of our cube and then one of the ends of our track piece to basically drive the pivot cube to tell it to rotate. And you'll notice when this pivot cube rotates now, that's what's causing the train to rotate. What we need to do is hide one of these circular track pieces so that we can see the curved piece of the track a little bit better. So I'm going to click on the arrow next to component pattern 1 for our curved train track, and then I'm going to click the arrow for element 1. And then this one that we grounded previously, let's right click on that and then just uncheck visibility just for the time being, because we need to be able to see this face right here for our next constraint. Okay, so go ahead and click constrain and then angle, and then we'll click on one side of your pivot cube. It doesn't really matter what side, and then click on this face right here for your curved train track piece, and then change that to directed angle, and then just leave it at 0 degrees. So that's fine, and then click apply. Right, and what you'll notice is the train is not able to move anymore. Again, just like we added with our wheel, we're going to have to drive that in order to get the cube to rotate around in a circle. Before we do that, let's go ahead and make the visibility of this true again so that shows. So check that visibility again. Now what we want to do is we just added this angle constraint to our pivot cube, so we can right click on that and then go drive, and then you can change this to a higher number. I'm going to make mine 5,400 degrees, and then you can click run, and you'll notice that runs. Mine actually moves in the opposite direction. So actually I'm going to flip this angle constraint that we just added. So let me go back into this and hide that, and I'm going to delete that and then just re-add it, but I'm going to reverse which way I selected on it. So I'm going to select this first this time, then the cube, directed, apply. All right, and before I unhide that, I'm just going to test this time to make sure that this works. 5,400. Yeah, and you'll notice that works this time. Okay, so then we can go back and unhide that. All right, so we know the train moves around in a circle by driving this constraint. What we want to do now is tell when this drives, tell the crank to also rotate, so that way the wheels look like they are moving as well. So what we can do is go back into your crank 1 constraint, which remember mine was in wheel 3, this constraint right here. So let's go into our parameters window. And then if you scroll down to the bottom, so we have our crank 1 and our crank 2 constraints that we added before that cause the wheels to rotate with the linkage arms. So this one right here that we just added between our pivot cube and the end of the track piece, we can just change this. We're going to just type in here crank 1/12. So crank 1 divided by 12. So that means for every 12 degrees that the crank rotates, this is going to rotate with it. Okay. All right, so then what we can do is we want to drive the crank 1 constraint. So just right click on that, click drive, and then we just leave that at 3600, that's fine. And then click run, and you'll notice what it does is it rotates the crank and it also moves the train forward. Okay, you'll notice that it does move it a little bit slow. So I'm going to click stop and I'm going to return it back. You can click the arrows down here if you want it to change how fast it's moving. Under this option menu here in increment, if we change this, let's just say that we wanted to make this 10 degrees, that will cause the train to move a little bit faster. Okay, so hopefully this helped and you were able to get your train to move around the track. Thanks for watching.